Well, good morning. Welcome to the second instalment of the Crucible Catch Up. This is our little review of the papers. So obviously we're reviewing day two. I'm joined by Jamie Broughton, one of the BBC's local radio reporters, who's here for the whole 17 days and very much enjoys the experience. Jamie, I guess the first thing to talk about, one of the articles I've noticed, is Michael White upsetting the odds and knocking out one of his boyhood heroes, Mark Williams. What a story and what a moment for such a young player.
To come here on your debut, Rob, and to play as well as Michael White did. I mean, obviously we've known for many years that he's got the potential. I mean, I think he made a century when he was 9 at a ridiculously young age. But to come here, as you say, play somebody he's just idolised growing up. Obviously a Welsh hero, one of the greatest players of the modern era, Mark Williams, a 2-times world champion. And all right, maybe not quite the player he was then when he was winning all those big titles, but still a tough prospect here to come here and do it. And even, when things didn't go quite his way in that match, his head didn't go down, he still kept going. When he got amongst the balls, he looked really, really good. And, he just seemed a really nice lad, really even sort of headed, didn't he? Not cocky. I mean, you've obviously got to have a certain amount of confidence, which he did. And, it's, as we've seen, I think, over the years before, sometimes when you come here, playing at the Crucible on your debut, or even just playing for an experienced player, can do funny things. You know all about it, being out there every day. And, it's such a claustrophobic environment. But Michael White, he came here and it didn't look like he was making his debut. It looked like somebody, who felt he should be here and certainly was very confident.
No, it was a brilliant moment. Good article here by Neil Goulding. Just a little extract. It says, "I'm over the moon." This is Michael White talking. "I'm over the moon. It's hard to take it all in," said White, the world number 41. "To win at the Crucible is something you dream of, but to actually do it is incredible." And I guess in a way it must have been a sort of mixed feeling for him, because to beat anyone, great, but to beat the guy that you've grown up desperate to emulate, and to have that character take it in such a good fashion, as you would inevitably would expect with Mark Williams. He's such a laid-back guy and such a good sport. The whole day must have been such a mix of emotions for him.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously from a Welsh point of view, sad to see one of the players go out, and particularly Mark Williams. But if you look at Michael White, I mean, he's obviously somebody who, it feels like the start of an era, doesn't it? I suppose a little bit like when, Mark Williams was playing, I think, Terry Griffiths in his last match here. It's like a handover from the generations. And you do get genuinely excited when you talk about Michael White, because you really do feel, out of the sort of crop of youngsters coming through, and we'll probably mention Jack Lazowski in a moment, you feel like he's one of the ones that could really get up there in the next couple of years. And, he's already started to get to venues and, in the main ranking events, but you really feel he's going to kick on and, maybe be a top 16 player in not too many years' time.
Well, talking about Jack Lazowski, there was a lot of attention on the youngster. He had a brilliant run over the first few months of the year. Knocked out Mark Selby at the PGC, beat Judd Trump, his former flatmate, in the first round in China, and got into the second round. But hopefully Lazowski's had a taste of the big time, and as you say, he'll come back for more.
Absolutely, and I think, the disappointment from Lazowski, I think, was very good last night, because, it hurt. And he wanted to be here, and he's played well. He's been to a quarter-final of a ranking event this season. His best mate is Judd Trump. He's practiced with him. He's practiced with Ronnie. He's had a taste of what the big time is, and he's not just somebody who's, I'm happy to be at the venue. I suppose to use football term, I'm happy to get the tracksuit and all that sort of stuff. He wants to be here, but I think he got a good lesson last night, because Barry Hawkins, an experienced pro, and if you remember when he was first playing here, he didn't have a great time early on, and he had to sort of learn how to play the venue and be more confident. But if you look at Lazowski last night, I think he got a lesson in safety play. And every time the ball went back after Hawkins had played a shot, it was behind a ball, he was snookered, he was tight on a cushion, and that's very demoralising, frustrating after a while. We see it with Mark Selby, don't we, who's got a great all-round game. And when you're struggling to get back in, you can make 20 and 30. You can't quite get going. And towards the end, I think Lazowski got really frustrated. But given, the career he's had, and it was only a few years ago that we were chatting to him about being given the Paul Hunter Scholarship, he's really kicked on and done really well. And I don't think there's any doubt that he's got, the mental attitude, the right attitude, he's got the work ethic, and he'll kick on, and we'll be seeing a lot more of him.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, there've been so many column inches dedicated to Ronnie. And as we look at this sort of mid-morning on the Monday, again, it's a Kevin Garside story in The Independent. Apologies to my wife, but the two sides of a Ronnie are a must-see. Now, we've spoken a lot about Ronnie, but let's touch on one of the players who, many people among the press are saying could, on his A game, on the right day, challenge him, Shaun Murphy. Murphy got through against Martin Gould, probably a trickier tie than it appeared on paper, because Gould's had a good season, but Did you see enough from Murphy to make you believe that with improvements he could challenge once again for this title?
Absolutely. I mean, the first frame last night in the second session was key. I mean, it went on for nearly an hour. It wasn't one you particularly want to watch, but Murphy said afterwards, I was determined to win it because he knew if he could get ahead rather than Gould pulling level, it would be a big confidence boost. But once he got through that frame, the next frame was barely 12 minutes, and Murphy started potting balls for fun. And when he gets amongst the balls, he scores quickly and heavily. He's a very popular player here. Obviously, he used to live not too far up the road in Rotherham. And, Murphy on his A game. And also, I think, he said himself, he's been disappointed, the last year or two. He's been getting to the latter stages, he's been getting to finals and semis. He hasn't quite got over the line. We know he's a top player. And, you wouldn't write him off. I mean, as he said himself, he won it as a qualifier, all those years ago, 2005. And I'm sure a lot of people would like to see him do well, and if he comes up against the Rocket, that'll be a good match, especially if they're both on their own game.
Yeah, well, that's going to be coming potentially much further down the line in the tournament. But for now, of course, Shaun Murphy has made it through. There'll be loads more to talk about throughout the rest of the championship. So join us tomorrow for another edition of the Crucible Catch Up.